Hello everyone and welcome to Homestead for a Living. I want to talk really quick about spot gardening, which is just a term that I'm making up for lack of a better one. And the idea is that you don't always have to be gardening in linear rows or long beds and perfectly defined spaces. You can really just drop a shovel into the ground, make a hole, amend it as needed, and plant right in there. And that is oftentimes a really good solution for using up small margins of land that are otherwise not being used but might have good soil or good access to water, or they're just in a place where you interact with a lot, or good light. So here's a good example of that. In this case, we have this edge of this driveway right here. We have this whole strip of land on this side getting great sun exposure because it's facing the south, and it got opened up to the sun when we carved out the driveway. But we do want to leave this barrier of evergreens as a privacy barrier between us and the neighbors. And so that leaves us with this little strip of land to fill in that has good access to light. We don't want to let it go to waste. And so what we've done is we planted apple trees, perennials, about every 15 feet apart, and they will go underneath the driveway and they will overhang it with their canopy, and we'll use all that space and all that light we opened up. But at the same time, those trees are 15 feet apart and they're not going to use the space in between them for a long time. Their canopy and their roots will not really take up that 15 feet in between them. There's probably a good 5 or 10 feet between each tree right now that has good light. It's along the driveway. We walk this pathway every day, so it's a good area for growing. And while it might be food forest eventually taken up by the apple trees or by their companion plants, in the meantime, we've got some space to use up. And so what we've been doing is just whenever we have something to use up, like a pack of garlic bulbs in this case, we throw them in just that little patch. And in this case, you can see how it did really well. All I did was just dug a really quick trench and amended it with a little bit of compost and threw those bulbs in, and they've been doing phenomenally ever since. It's a really good way to do things like tomatoes or peppers or anything where you start it with a seedling, because you can just shovel full out that's almost... Imagine that when you take that shovel full of dirt out, that little hole you made, just picture that as a pot. You're making a potted plant, except it's getting all of the native soil around it, and all that soil is intact and still has intact soil life, so you're not having to till it all up. So in many ways, it's kind of superior to traditional gardening. I find it kind of easy and a little bit lazy, and that's the kind of gardening I love. So I'll show you some more examples of that. Right here, we have a spot where it's in between the trees, and we're planting this one out actively. I had some onions left over to use up from after doing my longer rows. There was still a little bit left in the bag. So we just dig a little shovel hole, really tiny one, plant it right directly into it, add a little bit of compost and a little bit of native soil, and it's good to go. And that's exactly what we did with the garlic. It was that quick and that easy, and it did really phenomenally for us. It's also this is good from the mindset of somebody who's kind of trying to do a more discreet homestead or discreet food production, if they're like a prepper or if they are in an HOA area that doesn't allow for the production of food. You might have to be more discreet about it. And so this is a good way to do it, because to most people, this just looks like a scrubby area. You don't see anything but leaves and all that. But let's take a look at all of the food and the medicine in here. Of course, we're going to have onions coming up here. We've got an apple tree right here. We have our comfrey here, which is animal fodder as well as being medicinal and a great dynamic accumulator. We have dead nettle right here. That's a natural one that we forage, and we're leaving the forageables in there. We've got elderberry. We have turnip seeds. We have a miner's lettuce. We have turnip seeds here, and that's kind of different than spot gardening, but what we're doing there is we just throw the seeds out right before a rain. We just walk by a leafy area or anywhere that has decent light. We're just throwing the seeds out there and letting them do their thing and kind of using volume, because turnip seeds are so cheap. We buy the deer packs. And so those are growing everywhere, and that's just like, look at how bad this soil is. This is just clay they got thrown here from doing the driveway, but right up coming through that clay, these turnips are doing great. So between that, and one more thing here, we've got kale, we've got broccoli, we've got a lot of our cold weather things, all just tucked in these niches and these little spots in between the trees. So there's a lot of situations where this makes sense. If you're working with a big open field, this might make less sense. You might just go ahead and do rows there. But if you're working in any kind of a forested environment, or if you're creating a forest environment, this is a really good way to get maximum production out of the margins of your property. Hopefully that's a helpful hint for everybody. In the meantime, y'all stay safe, be well, and happy homesteading.